Oops.
Can you guys hear me now?
I can hear you now. That's great. Um, okay. So, yeah, this is the Oregon Population Forecast Program meeting for preliminary forecasts for counties and UGBs. This is our last meeting for the preliminary meetings and this is for Polk County. And I just do want to state again that these are the preliminary meetings. These are the forecasts that we put together that we use to generate conversation and to start the process of eliciting more data from local stakeholders about the cities and UGBs. So over the next couple of months, we will be updating forecasts. And so, with the information that you provide us as well on what we're missing in the current set of forecast. And so, if you see something that looks strange or amiss or that we're not accounting for, that's what we're here to fix. And that's what these conversations are for. And then over the next 3 months, we fix them. And then we have our proposal set of forecasts that we are saying these are the ones that we're really going with. Those are much harder to change over time, and we need a abundance of data to make sure this is like what we're missing, and we're hoping to avoid that. I know this is something that we went through with Polk and Marion before, where we did revise that, and we are happy to revise that when the evidence was there, and you did provide us with that, and we're hoping to just do that up front um, with counties and cities rather than pushing that to till March and April when it is much harder for us to change, and the documentation is just much more involved for everyone. So going forward, um, if you have any comments or questions, either about the process or the numbers that we're presenting are going to be posted on our website next week, feel free to reach out to us at askprc@pdx.edu. If they're forecasting questions, they get directed to me specifically. My name is Neil Marquez. I'm the Population Forecast Program Manager here at Portland State University PRC. So I'll be the one your questions are directed to. If they're about population estimates, things that happen related to the past, things that population estimates are used for Oregon dissemination of funding, those questions will get filtered to Huda, who would be happy to answer your questions as well. If you just email Ask PRC, they'll get forwarded to the right person. Just to give a overview of what we'll be discussing today. We'll be going over a population overview for Polk County, just sort of what we're thinking about when we're thinking about the aspects of what's driving population growth for Polk County. Then we'll review a total population forecast. For the area and how that differs from the last time that we've made the forecast. Look at births, deaths, and migration and how those are impacting the total population forecast for the area. Because as you remember from our presentation yesterday, the only way population can change is from births, deaths, and migration. And then how our forecasts reflect a different composition of both age and race ethnicity within the county as well. Then we'll dig in for the UGB forecast, and for those UGB forecasts, we'll be doing a historical population demographic review and housing review as well. We'll look at the UGB boundaries. We want to make sure specifically, especially the UGB boundaries, we have those right. And then look at the forecast and again comparing the last time that we made those forecasts as well. And I will say that we have big changes in the forecast, and we're happy to adjust that if we're provided the information or get updates on. I just want to make sure that we're you understand where we are in the ballpark, right? Where we're starting from. So looking at Polk at a glance, a population that is about 87,000 as of the 2027 census, population of non-white who is about 20%, population age 0 to 17 is 22%. Overall looks very similar to the rest of Oregon in terms of these demographic statistics that we're interested in looking at. In terms of job growth and industry growth within the area. No surprise here that, it's dominated by government and education and health services jobs within the area. You also see this uptick in trade, transportation, utilities within the area as well. And again, we like to look at construction as just a marker for development, housing and development and business development in the area. And you can see that, over time, it's generally been increasing, which is generally a good sign. Slow increases, albeit increasing over time. No surprise that Polk's biggest migration flow, where do people come in from? Where do they leave to when they're leaving and coming into Polk? That the biggest exchange happens with Marion County, the adjacent county nearby. More people leaving than coming in, but generally over the last 5 years, or between the 2016 and 2020 period, this is the most recent period that we have information from migration flows estimated from the census. So that dynamic may have shifted. Um, the big exchange between Marion County, more people coming in from Yamhill County than leaving, as well as and Benton County, as well as another one important one to mark for Polk migration. So, what do our forecasts look? They look quite different than last time. And there was a large amount of optimism for growth for Polk County last time. And I will say this is the biggest place where we've seen changes in population growth. And this is going to be particularly impacting a handful of cities and UGBs. And we'll talk about why this change has happened and where we think there's room for us to make adjustments, and think about adjustments moving forward as well. But right now, our baseline projections are here. I should explain this graph. Everything to the left of the dotted line, this dotted line represents where our projections start. Everything to the left is an estimate that's based on census data. So this is everything that's already happened and based on census estimates. Everything to the right that's in green is a current forecast. And everything in the black line is a forecast that we made last time in 2021. So you see there's pretty sizable differences when we go out in the further along years in 2070. Now we're forecasting a population of 136,000, where last time it was 189. That's more than a 50,000 person difference. So we're going to want to know why that's happening. What's occurring here? Why are we seeing this stark difference from the last time that we made this forecast? A big thing that we want to talk about is that historically growth has come from natural change and net migration. And in the future, it's going to be solely driven by net migration. In 2020 was the first time that we saw in both Oregon, but also for Polk County, that deaths outnumbered births. And we were forecasting this to happen previously, but not for another 10, 15 years. We're already at that pace now where the number of deaths outpaced births. And certainly this is COVID impacted as well, right? We saw a big increase in the number of deaths that are happening within the county. And people are also holding off from having kids while the economy is in an uncertain position, right? But we haven't seen bounce backs in bursts that we were expected initially when COVID had first started. And the bounce back in life expectancy and the decline in number of deaths has been there, but it's been slower than what we initially thought. So that's reflected in our forecast as well. And while we're expecting negative natural change in the coming years, more quickly than what we were anticipating last time. So that means that net migration is going to need to make up the numbers in order to account for that fact that more people are dying within the county than are being born. And when you have net migration making up the population change, you don't have that young population that is staying and aging in place. It's individuals who are 35 or 25 to 45 coming in or moving in and working and not contributing to a more long-term population growth in the same way that births are. So it's a different kind of growth. And we have a relatively optimistic, baseline trend of net migration. I can imagine making adjustments for this long term as the population age and the economy and jobs in the area are going to demand that we just have a younger working age population coming in here. But I do want to say that our baseline right now is already pretty high, and some of the shifts come away from both the fact that negative natural change has occurred a lot faster than we were anticipating last time, and net migrants are a little bit slower, aren't growing in the same way that we were forecasting last time. Although, we're open to discussing that as well. So it's important to note that again, we saw in 2020 this like stabilization and decline in the fertility rate, not necessarily in the total number of births overall, but definitely a decline in the fertility rate, which will become clear in the graphs that we show like moving forward, which led Polk had a growing birth rate, but then it's been stable over time and slightly declined in 2020. And we expect that decline to continue moving forward until the population it starts to grow from migrants having kids again, and the population grows over time, and the stabilization of the birth rate will lead to like more births over time. Deaths, however, drastically increased in 2020 to 2024 period. And again, that is understandable. But what we're seeing is that the amounts of life expectancy and the mortality rates aren't falling back as quickly overall to what we had seen before. So we expect life expectancy to increase over time, however, not as quickly as what we're anticipating before. And in addition, that as the population ages, we're going to see more deaths within the county as well. And so these things are going to impact population growth in all of the cities in Polk County as well. And so it's important to keep track of and why we're seeing some of the lower numbers that we're seeing. And so again, fertility rate here is what we're forecasted for. And historically, this has been lower than the state of Oregon, or rather, sorry, higher than the state, or lower. I keep missing out my words because I can't read this graph. Lower than the state of Oregon for most years, then became on par as the state of Oregon started decline in fertility rate. But we've seen this declining fertility rate over time across most counties, and we're expected to see this continuing happening forward. As of 2023, the fertility rate for the state of Oregon is hovering around 1.3, which is much lower than even everything that we have on this graph right now. It's about right here, so something that we're forecasting for the county even much later. But we're expecting Polk's fertility rate to continue to decline moving forward. And this isn't just happening to Polk County, it's happening to all counties. And it's happening across the whole of the United States as well. Um, Again, some of this bounce back in life expectancy is certainly happening. We don't have it reported here, but preliminary numbers for 2023 look like we're seeing more bounce back than what we had seen before. So on par to be coming back, not quite as high as what we had in 2018, 2019, but life expectancy starting to bounce back and growing at a slower pace than what we were projecting before. How is this affecting population aging? We expect aging will continue to occur, but not have as great of an impact as the rest of Oregon. Again, because of the young age population, the job demands, the high migration in the area, we expect that the aging that happens within Polk County will not be as compositionally as impactful as the rest of Oregon that's happening in the area. So you're seeing still a sizable working age population and not getting this top heavy structure that we get in a lot of other counties as populations continue to age over time. And growth in the areas, minority growth is expected to be a major contributor in future population growth moving forward. White growth is definitely happening there too, but the rate of non-white growth has outpaced historically white growth in the area, and we expect that continuing moving forward. So disproportionate amount of growth happening, especially among Hispanic and Asian Pacific Islander populations, contributing to population increases, although again, still also happening a sizable amount of growth amongst the white population as well. So population projections here, shown here. This is just an overview of the county overall, and of course we'll have graphs to dig into. Um, for the specifics, just want to give a general trend for the county overall. So looking at Dallas, Dallas County seat. I'm not sure if we have a rep from Dallas here. But population growth and housing growth has been pretty sizable. Population growth has outpaced housing growth within the area, 15% between 2010 and 2020, and only 11%. Pretty close though, but we like to see those numbers more similar to each other than not. A little bit older population in this area with a higher household income than we're seeing around the rest of the across the state, and high housing occupancy in the area as well, stronger sign from growth. Again, just generally want to make sure that these boundaries are relatively correct. You'll be able to look at these in more detail when they're posted on our website next week and make sure that the boundaries are, aligned to what your understanding of the UGB boundaries are as well. So, but just want to make sure that nothing egregious is popping up right here for Dallas, and we'll have these for the rest of cities as well. And so slower population growth, especially long term, it's not where we've adjusted anything specific for Dallas in this case. It's more just that Dallas is impacted by the greater things that we're forecasting for the county overall, and why you see the bigger discrepancy here. So it was benefiting from the higher migration than what we were anticipating before, and the higher birth rate that's now less impacting Dallas, and so slower growth rate than what we were seeing before. So Dallas is pretty much on par with the county growth rate moving forward, or the change in county growth rate. And you can see that here. Dallas growth rate in green, county growth rate in blue, and we're expecting those to be have historically been pretty similar and to be similar over time as well. Oh, I also want to point out for the county growth rate too, we did see less growth between 2010 and 2020 than when we saw prior, down to 1.5. But the current county growth rate is less than 1% right now. And so why we're seeing forecasting for the growth rate, we think that'll bounce back some, and why you see higher growth rate in the future rather than 2020 to 2030. And that's because the growth rate currently right now, based on our estimates, and this is corroborated by census estimates as well, are much lower than 1% right now. So we are expecting some bounce back in the next 5 years, and hopefully more bounce back in the next, 10, 15 years as well. Fall City, Fall City has a younger population, saw some population growth between 2000 and 2010, not as much housing growth within the area. And the city boundary, I believe, matches up with the UGB boundary. I think those are pretty synonymous with each other, rather. So again, another situation where the growth rate here is largely being impacted by the overall downward shift that we saw at the county level, rather than anything that's specific to Fall City. So if there is anything here that we should be taking into account, we don't have survey responses either this year or last time for Fall City. Had a little bit of a trouble getting in contact with Fall City. So I do have this marked for follow-up if we don't have any comments here. Okay, so independence is definitely one that I want to talk about, and where I'm anticipating spending a bit of time. Housing or population growth has slowed over time, but so has housing growth as well. And I want to make sure that we have this boundary right, and I know that there's this boundary. There's the shared boundary situation that we have going on. I'm not sure if there's annexations that we have missed, but I believe this UGB boundary is right. But if not, someone correct me if I am wrong.
UGB
Or-
boundary looks pretty good.
Okay.
Uh, there has been a couple of annexations that aren't reflected,
I
but
suspect the annexations are missing, but again, we want to get the city right for sure. We have the annexations on paper. We don't have them in our GIS records, so it doesn't get reflected on the map. But the UG boundaries are what we're forecasting for and what we want to make sure that we get right. But I'll have that marked down that there are annexations that we need to take into account. So overall, what we're seeing is a slower housing growth, only 300 unit growth where there was 100 unit growth before, compared to, or rather 1,000 unit growth before in the area. And post 2020, it's been even slower in terms of housing unit growth. I have marked here that there has been a total of about 60 new units in 4 years between 2020 and 2024. And I know that the last time we made the forecast, that there was a number of new housing developments and potentially maybe subdivisions. I don't remember if it was subdivisions, but projected to be 300 new units in the coming years. And that doesn't match the pace of what we've seen since 2021. And so Independence is one that has seen a big downward adjustment in the graph. And again, preliminary, but we want to make sure that we're understanding what the pace of housing development looks like, because last time we made these projections, we had Independence growing faster than Monmouth than in the projection cycle, and now it is slower. And I know that Independence is smaller right now, but we had it projecting to grow past that, and just wanted to get a sense of what housing development looks like, why these why this stall has happened, if you can provide any insight to that. And we could talk about that now. I'm also happy to follow up later if it's better that we talk about this at another time.
so, so I mean, I will say, I think the 2021 to 2024, I think we've had more than 60 new units.
Really?
So
Okay.
yeah, so I will want to I mean, I can get you information about that. We have been doing like a housing needs analysis and a housing production strategy. So, and I know that we pulled that data for those folks. So we should be able to
Okay.
have that information pretty easily. As for right now, like we have slowed down quite a bit, and I'll say 2023, 2024, we increased our SDCs, which has slowed things down. But prior to that point, yeah, definitely we had more than
Okay.
60 units. So,
I'm gonna follow up then with both you and Huda to make sure that we have that number right because that's going to be impacting our estimates as well. So I want to just make sure that we do have the right number, and maybe I just misread something on the sheet there. I'm earlier along in the process than the estimates, which are further along. So if I had that wrong, it's very easy for me to adjust it between now, but I do want to make sure that we have that right.
yeah, just reach out and I'm happy to talk about it more.
And Fred, are you the contact person? Sorry, did you just say that? I was writing notes.
Yeah, I'm probably the contact person.
Okay, great, great. Appreciate it. Yeah. And so here, while we had very high growth for independence growth rate, very much outpacing either the county, the region, the rest of the US, and their forecasts as well, we have it more on par with what has adjusted it so it reflects what's happening with the rest of Polk County, rather than the high growth that we were seeing before. Again, Monmouth here has had less slowdown in housing production. And so we definitely have an adjustment. Oh, I just want to make sure these boundaries are correct if and nothing doesn't look too different, especially for the UGB there. And we have definitely had some downward adjustments, but they are much more modest and more in the long term here than compared to independence. And part of that is that we haven't seen the same level of slowdown in housing production. I've seen 150 units, I think, in the past between 2020 and 2024, if I was reading that correct. And so that's part of why there's that deviation there. Again, historically higher growth than Polk County overall, and we expect that to continue moving forward. Salem, the largest part of our population here for the county. Sustained housing unit growth over time. It's slowed down, but slowing down to match rate almost on par with population. So you'll see more agreement in the population growth and the housing growth there as well. And again, we're talking specifically about the portion of Salem that's in Polk County. So if these numbers look off to you, it's because we're specifically talking about West Salem here in that portion. And I thought the city and UGB boundaries are synonymous, but I guess I was wrong. That there is portions of the UGB that fall outside of the city as well. And I'm sure that there are annexations that we're missing, but generally, if these UGB boundaries are right, that's what we're looking for. And so again, affected by the declines in population, but less so than other locations and more in the long term rather than the short term. For the 20-year UGB forecast horizon, it's pretty on par with what we did last time. It's really the 50-year horizon that is a bit slower, where you're seeing these impacts of lower migration and negative net natural change impacting what's going on. And Wilhelmina here, I haven't had. Do we have anyone on the call? I don't think so that we had anyone RSVP. It's one that we've had struggle getting in contact with people. Relatively small UGB and only part in Polk. We know this, and so this is simply reflecting the population within Polk County within the boundaries and want to make sure this side of the boundary is correct. But we have lower population growth here, and that's really driven by the slow housing production that happened between 2010 and 2020, and I haven't seen any change of that happening post 2020 either to make adjustments for. So if there is something that we're missing in terms of housing production on this side, definitely want to look into that. And again, I just want to say that this is the start for a lot of that, and I will be specifically reaching out to quite a few people, definitely Fred on this call, and trying to get into contact with cities that who couldn't make the meetings today, in which we need further information for to make sure that we are getting this right. So if you see something that looks amiss or that we're missing something, especially related to new industry within the area, growing industry within the area, new housing or infrastructure projects that are going to alter the trajectory of population growth in the area, we want to make sure that we're accounting for everything. So reach out to us if you're watching this on the call later, or if you think of something after this presentation at askprc@pdx.edu. You can reach out to that email, and if the question is about forecast, um, it will go to me. If it's about estimates, it'll go to Hoodle, get filtered to the right person, and we'll be able to respond to your question and take into your inquiries, take any of your inquiries. If not, there isn't any more questions. I'm going to stop the recording here, and at least for a few of you, you can expect a follow-up in the coming months or the coming weeks, rather.